Bethany, also with the Distance Learning Project.
Great. Go ahead and share my screen. Okay, everyone can see everything clearly?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Good. I'm recording. Everything is working just like it should. Great. So thanks for joining our session today. We're going to talk about the distance learning project's take on remote intake and orientation. So you might know some bits and pieces of what we do from, maybe meeting us at a conference face-to-face or just talking to us with doing another webinar or Zoom. So this will kind of give you everything you want to know about remote intake and orientation that we're doing. So we're going to use this graphic as we go along with our presentation, so you can kind of see the process. We have several steps, so we'll kind of jump back and forth between them and kind of chunk the information into these areas: the application, the orientation, the interview, and DL 101. So the first thing we're going to start is the very beginning, and we're going to start with Bethany. You want to go ahead and talk about our online application system?
Okay, so yes, I'm Bethany. Like Lisa said, we do have a multi-step process from when students first determine that they're interested in our program till we actually get them into a class. And the very first step is to fill out an application on our website. We just call that the online application system. And this website collects all of the information that we're required by the Department of Education to enter in eData. The only piece of information that we don't ask for on this website is a student's social security number. We do collect that during our phone interview with the student, which you'll hear about that a little bit later. But everything else that eData requires, we have built into our website. So students go on there first, they fill out the application, and then that signals us that we have the new application, and then we get started with the rest of the process. We also will go through and verify certain other pieces of information, such as phone number and address, because for some students, this does change. This information changes from the time they apply till they get to the interview step, such as the phone number, address, email address, as well as certain demographic information, like disabled, dislocated homemaker. Some of the more confusing demographic questions, they fill it out on the application, but then we do review that information with them later in the phone interview. Once students get through the entire process, we have an internal database that we use to maintain certain information on the students. It particularly comes in handy during those months when the eData system is down. It allows us to track their hours, assessment information, and we are able to export the data directly out of our online website and directly into the database, avoiding any type of data entry errors that might occur by hand keying all the information. This allows us to track, particularly for post-testing students. That way we don't lose those students in those months that the eData system is down.
Great. Thanks, Bethany. We are going to, I was writing this PowerPoint and I made all sorts of slides, and I was going to do all these screenshots, and I thought, wouldn't it be easier just to show you the module? So I'm just going to show you part of this orientation module that we kind of all developed together. And hopefully I shared the sound with you correctly, that you'll be able, oh, there we go. All right. So this is an orientation module that students can do at any time. We send them the link and they can view it, whenever they have time. It's an overview of our course, and we talk about it, we show them about it, we tell them again about it. So they kind of hear this information multiple times. I gotta check. Okay. So the students go through and they navigate this by using these next buttons here. Yeah, I was wrong. There's no sound. I apologize. It's just me, my own sound, my voice. And then students kind of get this overview of what it is to be a distance learning student. Here's some self-reflection questions. My need for distance learning is, hi, I need a job. So then they go ahead and submit. And then each one of these questions has some built-in feedback based on their answer. And it's just a way for them to kind of think like, is this what I really want to do? Would I prefer going to a face-to-face classroom? How much time do I have? Those kind of self-reflection questions. So I'll kind of go through a couple more of these quickly so we can get to some other meat of the module here. And then we kind of describe our process here in the 3-week session. And then again, we walk them through the process. Okay, you already did the application. Good job. This part's done. And you're doing the orientation module now. So we want to show them that they're making some progress through this process to get into the distance learning classes. And then we give them some more information about our expectations as far as how many hours we would like to see them do some work, some general information about the teacher. Again, they will talk to their teacher, so they're going to hear this information more than once. There we go, talk to your teacher. And then here are some questions here about, like this one in particular. If I get my teacher's voicemail, I should leave a message because we don't have a missed call feature. These are just some questions that, of course, we want them to know this information, but we're kind of asking them in a more fun way to kind of have them reflect on and also check for some understanding on the information that we gave you. And then here's some information about our attendance policy. We had recently changed that. So we had to change our orientation module for the students here. So this one here is an example of an exemption. And so as we have a student go through our sessions, they might not be able to complete the session. Maybe someone was in the hospital or for whatever the reasons are. So we want to make sure that they know what are good reasons for missing class time and what are bad reasons. And this is just another way of and how many hours we're asking them to work per session. We're asking them to work 15 hours per session. And again, some continuous feedback here. Good reasons for missing class, again, checking for understanding, and bad reasons for missing class is another, just a check for understanding here. And this again will give them feedback in here. These, you might have seen some of these questions before, things that I like to have in my life, check all that apply. I mean, I'm going back to some family literacy days with some of these questions, but just again, some questions about the students, their strengths, do they have a ride to work? They already have a job. These are just some things that we're bringing up to them. Remember, you have these things in your corner already, these tools. Things that I don't like about myself. And then again, some other questions about, and then we jump into the assessment questions and why it's important. I'm sure in your agencies also, they want to know, why do we need to take this, CASAS tape test? And so we want to make sure that it's, that they know the reasons behind, that it's a requirement. And it's also to check for their own understanding. And then, again, why do I need to do this? Why is this important? And this is all the above. I gave you a hint. And I think, and then the post-test question, when do I need to take a post-test? We would like to talk about it in the orientation module. So when we ask them to come back, they understand why. And then these are just some study tip questions, here I Google some words I don't know, check all that apply. And then these also have the built-in feedback for the students, so they can do this again at their leisure. They don't need a teacher to guide them through this. And then we're going to talk about distance learning 101. Christine's going to talk about that in just a minute. I'm not going to give you too much of that information. And distance learning is not mostly algebra. And distance learning 101 has no right or wrong answers. And I'll touch on that. And then we give them a little bit of information about how it works with our live online classes, about the lessons and the particular curriculum that we put them in, and the teacher and how the teacher interacts with them. And then this one is just a drag and drop. I hear a little bit of background noise. Let me just mute a couple of people here. There we go. All right, there we go. Thank you, guys. And what platform did we use to do the orientation? Yeah, you know what? I'll hold on to these. I'm going to get these at the end. Thank you so much. These are great questions. Christine or Bethany, remind me to get to those questions at the end. I'll go ahead through these here. So match each term with the definitions. So we'll help with your lessons. I believe that's the teacher will help with your, we'll work with these in your subject area. Oh gosh, I hope I get these right. Yay, all right, good. And then just a little overview about our English as a second language courses. ESL students do go through this orientation. Also, we tried to keep our language simple for our ESL students also. Where do I get my information about how to log on? A welcome email. And really, that's the only thing our ESL teachers need to know is we're going to give it all to you in a welcome email because they want to, write everything down. Here, all the above. There we go. And then this is just a brief information about GED and HiSET. They already kind of know this information before they even get to us about the test. And then here's just some, follow-up questions to check for understanding. Did they get the hours of when to contact a teacher? How can they contact the teacher? Telephone, email, text, yep, all the above. And again, this is all self-correcting. So the students here, if we put Library of Congress, submit, nope, sorry, try again. So, even if students miss a couple of these, it's self-correcting and they can go through and still get all that information. So a reason you might be closed from class is not having enough hours, not having 15 hours. In the very first class. And then what happens to a student if they don't complete the DL 101? They will be closed from the program. So it's a little tough love there for them, just to let them know how many weeks are there in this session. There are 3 weeks. And then at the very end of this, they click on this link. And Bethany, I hope you're not going to be too mad. I'll just do like tests. So then we just know when the students went ahead and completed the orientation, what the student's name is and their email. So let me go back to, oops, let me go back to sharing my PowerPoint. There you go, from the present slide. Oh, so sorry. So sorry, guys. So sorry. Let's go there from the current slide. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Christine, and then we'll grab all those questions at the end. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I'll just jump in where Lisa left off. That last page that she showed you is a Google Doc that replicates its answer into a Google Sheet. So that's the first thing when a student calls that I'll double check to make sure their name is there and indeed is ready to do the interview. So during the interview, I just verify the application information. I get their social security number at this point. And sometimes people are a little hesitant to give it and why do you need it? So I explain to them that, you know, it'll be locked away as soon as it's edited into the data that we compile. I talk about their goals and what they want to do after they get their diploma. Talk about which test they might be planning to take. And a lot of people know exactly, some people are kind of unknown and they want to know the differences, but I try not to go into too much detail at that point because that's one of the questions that they work on in the DL 101 course. And I always tell them that if they have questions after they've done that assignment, that I would be happy to talk to them more about the testing. And I have a puppy here, so I apologize for the noise behind me.
It happens to me all the time, Christine.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
As soon as I start to talk to somebody else, it's like the attention is no longer on him. So then I also give them information about the DL 101 course they will be taking. And we actually have 3 different ones now that I'll be talking about here in just a few minutes. After we talk about that, I also give them the next steps after they complete the DL 101 project about doing the assessment and answer any questions that they may have at that point in time before we start the DL 101 course. So every student now has to complete a DL 101 course in order to continue with the process of the orientation. All of our courses are in Canvas and students are placed in the appropriate one for them. So that's part of the thing that I also ask on the interview sheet is whether they're new or returning or if they're ESL. So as I said, we have 3 different ones. The first one, Remy, come here. The first one is probably the longest one. It's 12 assignments and I'm not going to read through those, but just some of the ones that we do, like we have them do a learning style quiz. And then from that, from picking the 2 top learning styles from the quiz, they also have a study tips that, you know, may help them to be motivated and to understand why, you know, taking notes might not just be the best thing for them, that there's other things they could do to help them with their studies. And the other one that I really like is the career section. We have them do an online career essay. It's the Pennsylvania State one that probably most of you are familiar with. And they have to decide about that, compare and contrast a couple of them, make sure that they're going to make enough money to be able to live on a career that they choose. And then one of the last things that they do is they compare the GED and the HiSET exams, you know, costs, what's on the tests, and which one they think might be better for them. The ESL students have 1 week to complete 8 assignments. And I do a lot of guided sentences for them to start them off, like start your sentences off with, or start your paragraph off with this. Feelings towards their English, their history of how much English they've had, what they feel they're challenged in, what they feel they do well in, goals and deadlines for how fast they want to be able to, you know, improve their English and for what reason. I have a definition list there that they're not supposed to use a dictionary for. They're supposed to try and out of context get them. So Some of the words are fluency, conversational English. I'm trying to think what else I have. I should have had my list in front of me. But they're basic words that every language learner should be familiar with. And if they're not, they will be very shortly when they get into classes. They also have to do, they break it down into 100%. So how much speaking, listening, reading, writing do they want and why? And when they will be happy with their language learning skills and what they're able to do. And the final one that we have, we just started this about 3 weeks ago. It's for students to return because we have a lot of students that inevitably don't always complete the 15 hours in a very timely manner. So they're closed and then they apply right away before the transition week's even over. So we've had them do a DL 101 course as well. And they only have 5 assignments, but I think they're ones that kind of get to what the meat of what they need to know. Remy. So we have
Christine, I can jump in. You go ahead and take care of your pup. I can finish up this slide. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So we just started with this distance learning 101 course. So we've had students that have been in our program and whatever reason, they didn't complete it. And so we asked them to reapply. And so part of this is these returning students, what did they miss as part of our process? Like they missed the minimum hours, or they missed the part where they had to, maybe attend a live online class, whatever it was, they missed part of it. So this is where we want to go back and kind of reflect on that time management. We all need that. Some Zoom meeting information we're adding in, as well as some email etiquette, how to answer your email and not use, text abbreviation and those kinds of things. We don't want to make it busy work, but we do want to make it, give them a step that they have to go through to get back into the program and catch anything that we missed with them, as far as understanding the expectations of the program. And I think that might have been Christine's last slide, but I know that we have some questions here. And if I could open up the chat, maybe I can. Oh, you know what? I bet you it's open in the background. Let's get that then. Here we go. And let's get rid of that. Close tabs, leave page. There it is. Okay, so questions here. How does the online intake work with ELS? Do they leave parts of the application blank because they do not understand? Yeah, Susan, good question. So yeah, we do work with them. That's part of the interview process. That's when we'll work with students to fill in any of those missing gaps with the ESL students. And participants, let's go ahead. Let me just stop sharing my screen. And Susan, if you want to go ahead and unmute your mic and elaborate on that question, or let me know if that answered your question, that'd be great.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had to take my headphones out and my dog was reacting to the other dog.
Of course.
No, that does answer it because since, of course, over the past year, we don't do this all the time, but for those who are testing, they're getting their CASAS assessment, remotely if they're ESL. We're also doing remote intake, and it's very time consuming, but we're trying to get that information, and students are reluctant when they're on, when they're doing it over the phone or over Zoom to give their social security numbers as well. So I can see also, that situation happening with you, but no, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let me see. I think we had a couple more questions. Oh, Allison, what platform did we use for the orientation module? It's been a process, and I think about maybe a handful of people that are even on this have helped along this process. It started out with a fancy PowerPoint, and then we moved on to Storyline, but before it was Storyline, can someone else refresh my memory on what the name of that product was? Not Storyline.
Lisa, do you mean Articulate?
Thank you. Yep, that's it. Yep, yep. So that what we did is we used their free trial sample and we built it really quick and published it. So yeah, if you want to use their free trial, I think the free trial was maybe 2 months. I'm not going to say really quick, but it was definitely worth playing around with the tools because we knew we wanted to have something that was a little bit more polished because we wanted to, keep showing it to students over and over again. So we were willing to put in that time up front to make it look a little bit fancier. Yeah, okay, well, that was it for the questions. I have the questions that were in the chat. I have a poll for us if you're interested in some questions. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Give you a couple minutes to, a minute or two to answer the poll here, if you haven't done that already. And, everyone's dog was barking. My trash guy's getting the trash. It's fine. Yeah, now's the right time to get the trash. And if someone wants to explain how to do the poll, I did it on my end as the host, but can someone explain how to do it on their end as the participant?
So what we're seeing, Lisa, is a list of questions where you can select one and then press submit.
Perfect. Thank you. So we got about 50% of you voted. I'll give you another 30 more seconds. Great. So results seems like a lot of you picked all the above. 76% of you picked all the above of the activities that your agency do at a distance. Great, great. So I think what I'll do is I'll go back to the PowerPoint and I'll share our contact information and then maybe open it up to any questions that you may have. Yeah, so there's our contact information. If you have any questions about remote intake and orientation for distance learning. So I'll just go ahead and open up the floor. Does anyone have any questions for us about intake or orientation? Christine or Bethany, anything specifically for us, specifically for ESL, or maybe specifically data related? Bethany, I'll put you on the spot.
Hi, I was wondering, I know that it looked like it took some time up front to develop your online, like the Articulate Storyline you were talking about, but I
Yeah.
wondered how much time it saved for you in the long run.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I know I've talked to some other programs, and especially during COVID, moving to that type of giving that information to students individually or in small groups and over Zoom and maybe a little bit here and there. I really do think it has saved us a lot of time. And as far as access, when students can do it at their, whatever time is convenient for them is also a plus. I mean, a lot of students work, on the weekends and at night on their lessons. And I don't want to teach, in the middle of the night. And so that, that works out perfect. Yeah. So any other questions for any of us?
Yeah, I have a question about where does the TABE testing or the CASAS testing come in the process? And are you doing online TABE testing, or do you require your students to come back into your facility for the written ones?
Yeah, good question. So I kind of dodged that because I feel like that was like a whole thing, is just assessment's a whole thing, but that's okay. I'm ready to talk about it. So for the distance learning project, if you're familiar with us, for years and years, we've referred students to agencies to test for us because, we really can't be all over Pennsylvania testing people. And so COVID kind of gave us an opportunity. I'm gonna really make it super shiny for us. Like, look at the opportunity we had with COVID. But we switched to online assessments. So the very first thing we did is we trained all of our teachers. There's 10 of us to give the CASAS assessment. This is just what we picked for our program. You can pick whatever assessment works for you, but that's what we chose to do. And it was clunky and it was hard. And, we were adjusting to working at home, and CASAS was adjusting, and, it wasn't smooth sailing. But as I look back on it, and now we kind of have it all set up where students kind of streamline in with an assessment, and we're able to grab them with our post-test. Now we have a couple of ways to make sure that they don't fall through the cracks. So we did learn a lot, but the online assessment part, so all that comes after. That would be the last part of that, all those circles. So that would be the last part. What we use is pick time, and we just have, different teachers available, days, evenings. I have one teacher that's lovely and works in the evenings and on the weekends, and he grabs a lot of students for us too. And we just have a student that picks an assessment time that works for them one-on-one with a teacher, and then then we're just ready to go to give that assessment. So I hope, Valerie, did that answer your question about assessment?
Well, you're not telling me anything that we don't know about how clunky and clumsy and generally miserable the whole thing is, but it's very difficult to say we're having distance learning classes or only doing Zoom. But by the way, you need to come in to see us every 3-4 weeks so we can post test you.
Yeah, that is difficult.
And we can't restart our classes until we have adequate post test done. Now we're caught up for this year because we didn't have that many students because of COVID. Everyone's numbers were down. But if we continue, I'm one of those poor souls that does teach in the evenings, and it's going to be a concern getting people in that I've never even spoken to try and find a facility that I think them tested, yet they're in my class and they're mine because I'm the math teacher and I'm the one that they come to see.
Yeah, Valerie, and if I could give you a little advice, I think having a system in place where it's very clear, step 1, 2, 3, 4, And then all the teachers have the buy-in too, that it's very clear, this is how students come in and this is how they progress. And if they miss those steps, that's okay, but they have to go back to the beginning and do that. And once you kind of get that set up, Valerie, I think it'll start easing all that clunkiness out, if that helps you at all.
Yeah. Oh, I think
it
your
is hard to get
process is
started.
excellent. Yeah, but I the way we're doing it at the moment is just too many nasty grams are getting
There's a
sent
lot.
to all the teachers. Why aren't these students post-testing? Well,
Mm.
you know, we don't actually know them.
Yeah,
except
yeah.
a blank screen or a pretty picture that was put up of themselves.
Yeah.
It does become.
Feel free to email me also if you want to follow up with this conversation. I'm happy to chat with you about that.
Okay.
Aren't any CASAS people here?
Well,
Does
Lisa,
anyone else have any? Yes, go ahead, Bethany.
Lisa, I'll just jump in here. One thing that we didn't say is each of the steps of the process, students are provided with a set deadline for how long they have to complete each step. So that does help as well. So if they don't register for an assessment by a certain time, then they're closed. If they don't complete DL 101 by their deadline, their application is closed. And all that information is provided with them when they get that set of information. And we only provide them with the instructions for one step at a time. So as they complete one step, then they get the next set of instructions. So that has helped with getting them through the entire process and getting them to do each step.
So you're not actually, although you're gathering the eData information, you're not actually entering them into eData until you have or have had someone else complete the tape of the CASAS testing.
Yeah, all the beginning is just our orientation
It's just
process.
purely your orientation.
That's us gathering all of the information that we need that is required for eData. We
I think
store
that's
the information in our internal database in the interim.
Yeah.
But it has helped to set the set deadlines for you have to do this step to get to this step, and you only have so long to do it.
Yeah, you can set the bar high, but you can't set it low and then expect to go high. It just
Right.
doesn't work.
Yeah, we've learned that the hard way. Yeah, you're right.
You can go one direction, make it a little easier, but not more difficult. All right, no, that's very helpful.
Great. Thank you, Valerie. Does anyone else have a question or a comment or want to share?
I did have a question about the difference between the questions you ask ESL students versus the students getting their GEDs. Do you go over the study skills and things with the ESL, or does that seem like it's too much at that level?
I'll let Christine answer that one.
Yeah, I guess it just depends on the students because we have varying levels. We do talk about study skills, but if you're referring to like the DL 101 and the interviews, they have separate ones. So I have a separate form that I use for ESL students and a separate DL 101 that I do for ESL students.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer your question, Lynn?
Yes, yes.
Great. I
Thank
think, Emily, did you have a question?
Yeah, you know, it's one of those moments where it's like, I don't know if I want to say something or not. First of all, I think this is amazing. Very impressed with what you folks have developed. I was actually starting to type it in the chat. So I'm trying to think of ways that I might, or we might be able to incorporate some of this type of a system or some online modules to assist with intake and orientation. And like, we don't currently have like an articulate license. I don't know if maybe you already mentioned this. And I had a phone call that I was on. If you know of any other platforms or websites or something that we could use to develop something similar to what you did?
I don't even think it has to be that fancy. I mean, you can certainly just do some type of video with some questions also at the end. I mean, we also had a video at one point that we used. So whatever works for you, it kind of evolved for us.
I really do
does
like
anyone-
the format that you use because, you know, they look over it and then they have to advance to the next slide. And I think the more times somebody can hear something, the better they remember it and better understand it, which I think is really important when you're, you know, going through all of the little details of the program. So
Yeah,
thank
that
you.
was our hope. We do have a couple of tech experts on here. Does anyone know of anything comparable to Articulate or Storyline that is inexpensive? Michael, I'm looking at you. or Bethany.
I think one thing you can do, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've done this before. You can actually get a free trial of Articulate
Yeah, that's what we did. Yeah.
for up to, I think it's 30 days or something.
Okay. I thought it
Yeah,
was-
I did. I've done that a couple of times. I don't know how
Oh.
many more email addresses I
Right.
have. But that's a great suggestion. Thanks.
Hey, this is Chuck. Just a couple of thoughts on this. You know, first of all, I think one of the important things is having that interaction where students have to answer questions, you know, to kind of reinforce the learning. So, I mean, you could certainly use something like, it wouldn't be as ideal because it wouldn't be, you know, it might be something more all at the end, but, you know, you could certainly use like Google Forms or SurveyMonkey or something like that to embed some questions in, or just to have students, at least that you're collecting the information. I think that's actually what we started doing before we used the Articulate, was we actually just had them submit, you know, almost like a summative questionnaire, and then we could reinforce things that they missed or things that they didn't seem like they understood in terms of what we wanted them to get out of it. There is and I apologize, Emily, I'll try and send this to you, but I was at a conference, a virtual conference over the winter, and I did see something where you could embed questions into a video. So like if you made a video, you could actually embed questions that people would have to answer while they were viewing the video. So I'll go through my notes. Like I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I'll try and dig that up and I'll send that information to you if it's something you're interested in.
So thanks, Chuck. I hadn't even thought of that before. It wouldn't have been Edpuzzle, would it have? Because I use that a lot. And when you just said that, I was like, wow, maybe I could do it that way.
It's not, but that's certainly another possibility. It was something I kind of remember, it was developed by like the University of Minnesota or something like that. So yeah, I'll try and dig that up for you and send that to you.
Great. Thanks, Chuck.
Mhm.
Thanks, Emily. Anyone else have a question for us? Comment, share? No? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I think, thank you, Sarah. Nearpod, yes, Nearpod will allow you to build interactive activities to also embed video and custom questions. Yes, Sarah, thank you. Great, I think I'll let everyone go a little early. Unless you have questions, feel free to stick around. If not, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today and enjoy the rest of the technology conference.
Thank you.